Musings podcast on the week of punk. My name is Sergio Alderman. I am the writer for the Styles Makes Fights series of articles or series at Pro Wrestling Musings. And I'm joined by two guests, Peter Edge and Grayson Peltier. Peter, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, yeah, obviously Peter Edge here. I started writing for Pro Wrestling Musings a couple of weeks ago, and I was a big time wrestling fan for almost 30 years now. So getting back into pro wrestling thanks to AEW and especially CM Punk. Very much looking forward to today's show, talking about the power of Punk, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you had mentioned that that writing about punk and that being on this podcast was a special interest to you because punk is like pretty central to your fandom. He brought you back to wrestling, something along those lines, I believe you said.
Oh yeah, I mean, without getting into complete, I mean after certain incidents in 2007, let's put it that way, I stopped watching wrestling and for a couple of years, and then Punk. I noticed Punk was doing things, and obviously when he turned heel it was supposed to be 09, wasn't it? When he turned heel and had that great run in 2010, I just got started watching WWE again, and 2011, I stopped watching WWE round about 2014, really, when Punk and Daniel Bryan left the scene for a while. So it's kind of weird getting back into pro wrestling, watching Punk and Bryan in AEW. Well, maybe
We
Punk,
hope.
maybe Bryan, the way things are going. Who knows? Probably, I'm guessing. But Punk is one of my favorite of all time. Let's put it that way.
Sure. Now, Grayson, how about you? Introduce yourself a little bit.
Yes. Thank you, Sergey. It's great to be on with you today. My name's Grayson Peltier. I have experience mostly as a political communicator and political reporter and commentator. I'm the host of the Fixer Punk podcast. You can find that at fixerpunk, FIXERPUNK.com. I've done a lot of commentary that crosses between the worlds of sports, culture, and politics and social impact. That's one of my primary areas of interest, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I started out sort of looking at the impact of punk culture and politics, sort of those more freedom-oriented but also communitarian ideas. And studied skateboarding culture when I was at USC. I'm a graduate of USC with a degree in political science. And that led me down sort of the rabbit hole of thinking about punk rock and straight edge culture, which CM Punk is a part of. And I heard about CM Punk through those particular avenues. I've kind of been on and off interested in pro wrestling, but I actually came into being a wrestling fan really being truly a fan for the first time in my life this past year because of Adam Page and his story and his sort of anxious millennial cowboy idea, which I find to be very groundbreaking. Like in the ways that I've studied sports cultures, there are so many things in wrestling right now that I think are groundbreaking in the area of social impact and athlete activism. Adam Page was the first one I saw in AEW that was really going that direction. And I have a whole article about that on the fixerpunk.com website. But then CM Punk now has even more. There's even more of a story to tell there, which on Pro Wrestling Musings, my first piece for Pro Wrestling Musings, is on CM Punk and how he's emblematic of punk rock culture. So I'm glad to be part of this discussion today, and I'm glad to be here at this time for the sport of pro wrestling.
Yeah, the reason that Grayson is with us is because on Twitter I came across a link to Grayson's article about or his piece about the links between fighting toxic masculinity and the storyline of Adam Page. And I really thought it was great, and so we wanted him to write and work with us here at Pro Wrestling Musings. So glad to have you. So what we usually do at the Pro Wrestling Musings podcast with Griff as our usual host is we talk about our reactions to everything that happened in AEW programming for the week. And that podcast will be coming. But to take a little bit of a load off of them in a week that's so full of news, and we want to focus just on CM Punk. Can we do a podcast that's just about one wrestler and basically 1 week of their life? I think that we can, because it's just that compelling this week in CM Punk's life and in his effect on pro wrestling fandom, on the world of pro wrestling in this past week. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So I'm going to start with um, a week ago. A week ago, uh, CM Punk was still, as far as anything confirmed, still retired. Retired 7 years, had made noises many times about having no interest in returning to pro wrestling, and yet there were rumors, breaking stories. We had Cassidy Haynes on one of our other podcasts earlier to talk to us about the story that he broke, that CM Punk, and that he got a great deal of pretty nasty and just negative pushback that he was making it up. That CM Punk was coming back and that he would be at First Dance. Um, uh, let's see. Uh, I'm going to start with Peter. Um, give me your thoughts on the that moment when we didn't yet have it confirmed, but we had kind of the worst kept secret that Punk was returning.
Yeah, no, it was certainly it was very different from how you advertise pro wrestling. It was like, you said it was the worst kept secret in pro wrestling history. Let's be honest. It was like, it's the First Dance. It's in Chicago. It's United Center. You've got the drop of the name by Darby Allin. You've got them focusing on the CM Punk chant when the announcements of the First Dance happened. It was something that is very unique to how you do pro wrestling. It's very unique to how you do advertising. I mean, for example, like me being the curious person that I am, I ended up after the day after the Spider-Man trailer got announced. I just asked a bunch of my friends, and I just asked, would you really, with the idea of what happened with Punk last week, I asked them, I said, would you like an idea of like no trailers, no TV adverts, them just say Spider-Man 3, cinemas, December 17th. How would you feel about that? And every single one of my friends said, no, I would not want that. I want the trailers. I want I want see the clips and go, oh, that could be interesting and stuff like that. They just did
Really?
not want. They did not want. No, to a man and a woman, none of them said, I don't want that. I don't want the surprises. I want to see those. What I saw the clips of the trailers, and I
That's
want to kind
so
of like.
surprising to me.
I
I,
was shocked when everyone said
it's
that. I was
it's
flabbergasted,
it,
and
let me
I
break
was
in.
just
Sorry.
sorry. No, and
It's really funny to me that you went to that metaphor, because I think I tweeted something similar of just that when Punk debuted, my immediate reaction was, why doesn't Marvel do this? They know we're going to see Spider-Man. That would be so awesome to just have something where it's just like, it's Spider-Man. You're going to go see it. That's all you need to know.
I think it was actually I think it was your tweet that kind of got my brain stirring about that actual idea. When I sent the text on the group chat to my friends, just going like, "What was it?" I was there. I was very surprised with the actual answer. I think it's just kind of like, so. What happened with Punk is very unique. I mean it's unique because with professional wrestling as an entity is very unique in its own way. And
Hmm.
the idea that you could do something like this, and then you saw on Twitter a lot of people making jokes about what if he didn't turn up? There'd be a riot. It was one of those like trying to transfer. I think to the point where I think Tony Khan said something on Busted Open to kind of like calm everyone down a little bit, and then he sent the tweet the day before or the day of just to say, something's going to happen, guys. Just to calm everyone down a bit. I think everyone was getting a little bit anxious, going, "Is this not happening?" Obviously, thank God it did happen, because it was one of the greatest, which we'll go on to later on when we talk about it. It was one of the great moments in the history of this great sport, to quote Tony Schiavone. And it was just so it was a very unique circumstance how we got to the first dance, but yeah, it was everyone remembers their first dance, don't they? And yeah, we certainly do on this occasion.
Well,
Absolutely.
I think this shows sort of a mastery, if I may. It shows sort of a mastery that AEW has in the area of guerrilla marketing and in the area of making
Absolutely.
it sort of elusive, because there is an appeal to that. Because if you go out, you put a ton of billboards out, you say, oh yes, this is CM Punk, this is, everybody is going to know what it is, and there may not be as much mystery to it. There are probably people, especially with that anxiety, there are probably people who tuned in to Rampage specifically to see whether or not it was actually true, not necessarily to even hear the words of CM Punk. And that's obvious, that's a gamble to take for a brand. But in this case, it paid off. And I tend to like, in my time working in marketing, I tend to like making things a little bit elusive to an extent, not to an extent where in a business environment you're dampening customer experience, and that's why Tony Khan did what he did with his comments, calming everybody down, but to an extent where the person is it just interested enough to the point where you don't go over sort of that parabolic curve of where the interest would drop off after they've already heard what it is they're getting.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about it is that after the fact, once we learned a little bit more about how they came to this plan, when they talked about it a little bit in the media scrum after, I mean, I don't know to what extent it's a kayfabe, or to what extent they're really saying what went down, but it really sounded like. I mean, it's funny because after the fact, it seems like it was such a brilliant plan and so well executed and so perfect. But the way that Punk and Tony Khan described it, it sounded like it was a compromise, between Punk's desire to have a little bit of a surprise, and his not just his desire to have a surprise, but his understanding of his audience, that would be most effective for the audience in the arena at the time, and then Tony Khan's need as a promoter to get that rating and to get people excited, and not have it just be a completely cold surprise. And it's one of those things. You can make a complete surprise work, and he has before, but you want to have as many eyeballs on it as possible. With the Sting surprise, they had a title match. They had a lot of promotion of that episode unrelated to Sting, so they were able to keep Sting a complete surprise without worrying that, oh well, who will anybody even show up to watch it. But this was it seems like it was arrived at as a compromise, but it turned out so perfect.
Yeah.
Definitely. Sometimes the best marketing techniques come about by accident or by circumstance, and this is no exception.
Hmm. So the next thing that I was going to talk about is the interesting choice to have CM Punk debut on uh, uh, the show on Friday night, instead of the established Wednesday night show in prime time. We have a show that's kind of late at night on a Friday, what's considered a ratings death zone, but that's when they decided to uh, put this amazing and highly anticipated debut. Either of you, whoever wants to jump in, we'll see if we can if we can do this without talking over each other. We'll give it a try. Whoever has a thought on this, go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, no, I think when it comes to like Rampage, I think first of all, it's trying to educate the audience to say Rampage is a big deal, guys. This is not the B show.
Hmm.
This is it's going. We can talk. I mean, I can go on for ages about what Rampage is going to be going forward, but it's kind of like, but with the Punk show and with the Punk obviously appearance on Friday and the week before with the Kenny Omega versus Christian match and the one the show coming up on Friday with the final of the tag team eliminator tournaments. They're basically telling you this is a big deal show. If you don't watch this show, you're missing out on stuff. And I think it was perfect with Punk. Also, it's one of those things where I think I'd love to know when the deal got signed and how long it was. I'm guessing that Punk wanted it to be in Chicago. He wanted to be in the United Center. You're talking about the media scrum afterwards. I don't think that got mentioned. That it was Punk's idea to do it in Chicago, in the United Center, and obviously if they've got their dynamites already mapped out and they've already booked their buildings 3 months out, 2 months out. It's kind of like they obviously signed the deal, and they said, "Well, we haven't got a dynamite in dynamite in Chicago, so we need to find a Rampage." And obviously, it's easier for them to slot that show in when they can do it because the original idea and the idea going forward from this week's show is tape the Rampage after Dynamite.
Hmm.
Obviously, you can slot in a live show. Live show. It kind of talking about the topic earlier. About the rumors and how the rumors got started. You can say, first dance in Chicago, and it kind of like it just really, I think it was a what's the word I'm looking for? It was something that you can do and bring a lot of importance to Rampage, and it was just a happy accident. And sometimes in life you don't need to be good. Sometimes you need to be lucky. And they got
Hmm.
a lot of luck from their way when it came to the planning of this, I guess, if with the timing and everything, especially 2 weeks before a big pay per view as well. It just
Well,
everything works out perfectly for them.
that's true. And, I think another point is that, I mean, obviously, it was the fact that the United Center was available and they felt that they could fill it based on the rumors. Uh, but also, you have to keep in mind that this particular episode of Rampage is uh, coming off of somebody else's go home show, the go home show to SummerSlam, and kind of taking all of the wind out of their sails in a kind of a way that I don't see AEW as generally a reactive kind of a promotion, but in this one case it feels like counter programming. Go ahead.
I was just saying. So I was just saying that when it came to SmackDown, honestly, I don't think I read a single results page of that show on Friday. Obviously, without time in the UK, it's kind of like I stayed up until, for various reasons, I stayed up until 3 in the morning to watch Rampage, went to bed, had to go straight to work at 9 a.m. I literally would not. The only thing I know about SmackDown still now is that Edge apparently did a bloodbath on Seth Rollins. That's the only thing I know that happened on that show. I literally have not read a single moment. Why? Because I was so caught up mentally and in that Punk return. I just completely. I literally. It's one of those things. I didn't even know SummerSlam happened until I looked at my phone after a night out on the bus on the way home at 2 in the morning. I was like, "Oh, SummerSlam's on." Yeah. It was just that's how much Punk has taken the attention of me as a fan, as a wrestling fan. It's just like it was a masterstroke from AEW. Let's be honest.
He's
Yeah,
everything that's going on, it feels like. Go ahead, Grayson.
I didn't even honestly. I didn't the counter programming angle. That's a really good angle to take it, actually, Peter. But I just thought of it as kind of like a discussion of like where we have this new show here. It's in a time slot that's difficult. We have to put
Hmm.
extra effort into making this thing work. I could just imagine between Khan and TNT, how are we going to make this show actually work? The first week's ratings weren't terribly good, weren't terribly bad either. But how are we going to make this work? And they're thinking, okay, what do we have here at our disposal? And the CM Punk opportunity worked like that to actually make it clear to the people on the business end that this show is actually something that is a worthwhile pursuit. Because in the first few episodes of a show, that's really when networks are just trying to test out and see, okay, is this something valuable, is this something worthwhile? And bringing in CM Punk and the huge ratings pop that came from that makes it clear to everybody involved, look, this is worthwhile, this is something that we have to keep doing, and this company is going to put forth the effort to keep this Friday night slot doing well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, this isn't really as related to CM Punk, and maybe is getting off the subject a little bit, but I think in many ways, a 1 hour show is just really ideal, and I think that Rampage is an opportunity for them to show that, in the
Yes.
sense of, like, a 1 hour show once a week is maybe not ideal for telling all the stories we want to tell, but that's what Dynamite is for. And Rampage is our opportunity to just showcase some things. Here is an hour of great wrestling that you will enjoy, mostly wrestling or maybe some promos. This is a fun hour. And then on Wednesday we'll get back to moving forward our storylines. Go ahead.
Yes, I love that it's an hour. I love that it's just 1 hour, especially with that time slot.
Yeah. Let's see. Now, one of the things that caused a lot of debate and talk in the lead up to the rumored return of CM Punk was, would he bring back Cult of Personality, for multiple reasons. One, of course, it's not free. Uh, but of course, Tony Khan has proven in the past his willingness to open up his checkbook for music. But would Cult of Personality be back, both because of the whatever it may have cost, also because some people have what attachment or preference for other themes that he's had in the past. What do you think, Peter?
First of all, it's one of those. Look at from my UK hat on. I mean, Cult of Personality really wasn't really a big hit in this country. I kind of like looked at the if I should quite quickly look at what I'm talking, the actual chart listings for Cult of Personality in this country. I've only ever once heard it in a pub in back home here in Birmingham, and that's a rock pub, so that kind of doesn't really count, I don't think. I mean, is a I don't. Yeah, I'm not saying it wasn't even on at the karaoke bar I was in on Saturday night. So it obviously isn't a big deal of a song in this country. But
You
it's
mentioned that, like, I wanted to sing it, and it wasn't
I
that it
know
wasn't
I
on
was
the
thinking
karaoke list.
I ended up listening. I ended up doing X Club 7 all night. It's fine. Oh, but I'm Backstreet Boys. I want it that way. I coped. I coped. I didn't have my voice was completely gone that next morning. But that's a whole other story. But no. But I don't know. So I don't really know what the song means to America as a country because I don't know how big it is in the US. Here in the UK, actually, I just looked here. It finished. It was 67th in the peak position in the UK when it was released. So that shows you how unlistened to that song is. But no, I don't know how much. I I don't know how much it would cost Tony to actually get that song because compared to other songs because it's not you know it's not I would imagine Wild Thing probably cost a lot more money than Cult of Personality did for Tony's checkbook. I'd imagine. I don't know. He's got and also I imagine Living Colour. Obviously they're smart guys. They know their fame has gone in the last decade has probably increased thanks to CM Punk's usage of the song. So I don't. So I think they might be very, very willing to let Tony take it at not a reduced price, but not be hardball in the negotiations, I guess. So yeah, it didn't surprise me that Cult of Personality was used because it just makes it's Punk's presentation now. It's his song. It's his deal. So yeah, not really a surprise here at all.
Absolutely, that's a really good point. Is the effect it has on the band itself, and I mean, for a lot of people, the reason they're aware of that song, and to some extent, maybe even the reason they're aware of that band, is that it was iconically CM Punk's entrance song. Um,
Yeah,
which kind of reminds me of when they were trying to get Orange Cassidy's theme from the Indies, Jane, and they couldn't get it because the whoever was representation for Jefferson Starship just wouldn't even get back to Tony Khan and all of his attempts to communicate with them. So we had to. It's like, okay, we're going with something else. We want him to have a classic rock song, and so we're gonna go with what band is that?
And the
The
Pixies,
Pixies.
it's the
the Fight,
Pixies.
the song from Fight Club. Yeah, the song. That's what. Again, that must have been a bit of money for as well, considering the fame that song has got in the last 20 years because of the Fight Club.
Sure, sure. Now, before I make up another point, a separate point about that, was there something you wanted to say, Grayson?
Yeah, yeah. So with the song "Cult of Personality," I feel like, yeah, that's basically just, it's like it's like bread and butter. You have "Cult of Personality" and CM Punk. It's very much entwined. And
Peanut butter and
anecdote
jam.
Yep, that kind of thing. But anecdotally, I do recall that back when I like barely cared about pro wrestling at all, back between, like, I don't know, 2010 to like 2012, I remember a classic rock station that was playing inside of a business that I would frequent, and Cult of Personality was playing, like, it was basically on heavy rotation during that time. So I feel like during that time, obviously, CM Punk was actually active in WWE. So there is, I feel like there is an impact of that song in the American psyche from CM Punk. I don't know in which direction it flows, which came first, but I do feel like that is a strong connection that the fans have, and it's a song that's very much liked. So it was definitely the right decision. If it was any other theme he came out to, I feel like there actually would have been some sort of disappointment in the fans, and we may not have even seen the same pop we did within the arena if it was a different song.
Yeah, that's quite possible. Now the two factors that kind of made some wonder if they might go with something else was that for some people prefer "This Fire Burns." It was another theme that he had previously used, also by a pretty popular band, I guess. And some people were like, "Oh, I just love "This Fire Burns. They really should bring it back." And I get that. It's just a matter of personal music taste. For me, it's just like, really, Above Living Color? I can't see it. Peter's, yeah.
I
Um,
don't see it either, and I don't
yeah.
think that's the popular. They had to go the most popular choice
Hmm.
because they're trying to attract and maintain the audience, and it worked.
Oh, absolutely. The other thing about it is the lyrics. I feel that Cult of Personality is something that part of the reason it was chosen originally was how WWE and how Vince McMahon saw Punk's appeal back in the day of like, we don't understand why you like him, but for some reason you crazy people think he's great, and that's kind of how the lyrics relate to him. But I feel like at this point it's a case of, well, yeah, that's one perspective on it, but it's so linked to me at this point, who cares?
But
Yeah,
no, you embrace you
I
embrace
want to
it.
get into my Vince McMahon impression when you say stuff like that. God damn, pal. I don't know why you like people like him, but gosh, we're gonna play that song.
But no,
uh
it's a matter of embracing it. It's a matter
yeah,
of embracing that weird identity. That's a very much a punk rock idea. Is you're embracing that weird identity. And if any wrestling company knows how to turn a cult into something that's a positive, go through the
good
institutionalization,
points.
as we call it in political science process. It's AEW with what they did with Dark Order. So having a cult there, having that sort of lyric, and then having a loved face character, not a problem at all for AEW. Maybe it's a problem in the small minds of WWE, but not a problem at all at AEW. They get the nuance, they get the connection.
That's a really good point. I hadn't even thought of the connection with the Dark Order turning babyface. So finally, Friday rolled around. Everyone was just hyped for it because, like, I mean, I think that most people were like, "It's going to happen." They've basically confirmed it, but without confirming it, there was just that tiny bit of tension that made it that much more exciting. Um, so I think that I, at least, and I'm sure that probably a lot of other people assumed that this would be the final segment, that it would be the closing segment of the show. I know that when the chant started and the music hit, I was surprised, and at the same time was like, "Oh yes, of course. This of course was the right call. I was wrong to think that they would put this on last." Um, tell me about your thoughts when the chants and when the first notes of Cult of Personality started. Grayson, what tell me about that moment for you.
Yeah, so that moment involved kind of rushing to the TV for me because I was kind of operating on that same assumption that they would come last. But it was a sense of delight and honestly, it just felt really really good that they're bringing it in there, and you needed that. I think the tension and the thinking about CM Punk, excuse me, um, may have kind of dampened how the other matches were perceived. That maybe people wouldn't be paying attention. It's a gamble both ways, whether or not you lose all the interest after CM Punk. But I feel like bringing that excitement early on and keeping that and having that there to lead in was just a really it was just a really amazing experience, and I feel like it actually kind of makes it stick more while not dampening out the rest of the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, what about you, Peter?
I mean, for me, it was like I'm watching it on my phone on Fight TV here in the UK because, and yeah, at least it was it was sorry, and yeah, it was just more like it was yeah, didn't want to wake anyone up, so I just did like a big fist pump basically because it was just like it's happening, and yeah, it's just like yeah. It's the ovation nearly blew my ears out when I listened to it on the headphones. It's just one of those things moments you will never forget. It was just an insane moment. I think I've watched that entrance on YouTube probably 20 times now. It's just one of those moments that you can watch over and over and over again, and just it's just a sensational moment.
Yeah, wow, I hadn't even thought about that very much. What 10 p.m. Eastern is what time for you? 3 or 4
3
a.m.?
a.m. in the morning.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Uh,
didn't get much sleep that night, and I didn't work and karaoke bars. It was not a fun Sunday. Let's put it that way.
uh, all right. So, the next day, I believe, whoever runs Guinness Book of Records Twitter hinted that perhaps it's not necessarily something that they can measure and put in their book, but maybe this was the biggest wrestling pop of all time. So. Uh, the fan reaction that we got was amazing, and on a level that's not surprising, but also just amazing emotional engagement that the audience had with that moment. Grayson, talk a little bit about that emotional engagement that you saw that CM Punk had with the audience in that moment.
Yes. So really, really, what happened there is that CM Punk didn't come out in the overwhelming sense of strength that you would expect the best in the world, the best gladiator wrestler to come in with. From the very outset, he was walking out and then wound up on his knees, and that particular piece of body language is very important because it shows that he is sort of I don't want to say in submission to the fans, but I want to say that he is actually that he is showing a sense of appreciation, a sense of connection with the fans' sense of emotion that you wouldn't necessarily expect from this particular context. And then with his words, the way he affirms the fans' emotions. First, he sort of breaks up the tension of all of this stuff with a little bit of humor. The Britt Baker comment was very well timed, and it was a call out to somebody who was there in the company that's well respected. But the the way he said, "Well, I'm winging it, and I don't know what I didn't know what I was going to feel, but I knew that I needed to feel it." That was the sense that a lot of people in that arena had, a lot of people at home had. You can tell there were reactions ranging from exuberance to trying to be excited while not waking up your people around you because it's so late. There's all the way to breaking down and crying in that moment. And CM Punk participated in that, and he also affirmed it
Mhm.
as a valid response to his comeback. And that's a really important way of building a connection. That's not a type of connection that even I would have expected. But when you have somebody at CM Punk's caliber, not only as a wrestler but as a rhetorician, you get that's
Mhm.
what you get, and that's the difference that he makes.
Yeah, you make some really excellent points. I think that it's important to note, though, that as great as CM Punk is at everything he does with body language and with and with his words, that the example that everybody goes to of the emotional reaction was before he had a chance to do much of anything besides come out. The CM Punk crying man is very early on, and him just he just had walked out. That's about it. And so that you're right that that CM Punk validated that reaction, but he didn't create it other than just through the the feelings that the fans already had from him for him from 7 years ago. I mean, all that body language stuff is true, but also he just blatantly went with crowd surfing and hugging fans. There's a lot of pro wrestlers who feel that their character is best served by a little bit of aloofness. And it works for some characters, but he completely rejected that. It was all about he was there with the people in the crowd,
So
hugging,
we
crowd surfing, and yes, he used the word "we," and that I think is a controversial word, not in the sense that of should he have used it, but what he meant by it. I've heard so many takes. I agree with you that he meant we, myself, the performer, and you, the audience. We are in this together. I've heard many people who believe that he means we, as in myself, the performer, and AEW, the promotion, are working together on this instead of being at loggerheads like I was in a previous promotion. It's an interesting other take. I don't agree with it, but that's
two
another
things
one.
can be true at the same time.
That's true. He could mean both. Of course, I've heard the like um, whose side is he on stuff of like he means that he's bringing in somebody else. That's a reference to Danielson or something. I feel like he meant by we, me and you, the audience. We're together. This I'm not doing this myself. We are a performance. This wrestling performance of this wrestling promo is accomplished not just by the wrestler, but also by the audience. The audience's reaction is part of the performance and always has been. And he was acknowledging that.
Yeah, the one thing I'll just say, it's one thing I'll just say is that about the emotional engagement is that I wrote this in my column for Pro Wrestling Musings, is that it was basically 15,000 people telling one man how much they love him, and
Mm,
that one man telling those 15,000 people how much he loves them.
yeah.
That's what that entrance was. It was just, it was it was a cult of personality. It was actually never has a song fitted a moment so much as that moment. It was kind of, and you first about the Wii moment. We'll get onto the actual promo in a bit, but yeah, he was talking. He was talking about there's nothing more dangerous than facing CM Punk. There's actually one thing more dangerous than facing CM Punk. It's facing CM Punk in Chicago.
You
It's
know,
Money in the Bank 2011 comes to mind. It's
absolutely.
so it's I don't think there's ever been a connection between a city and a wrestler
Hmm.
as there's been between Chicago and CM Punk. It's kind of like, we always talk about mainstream, who's a bigger mainstream star than who's pushing the needle, all that. You know what? I just said it. No man in professional wrestling will ever have that connection to a city that CM Punk has to Chicago.
Yeah,
Never.
no, no, I hear you. That I hadn't really looked at it that way because, when he said that, it's like it made absolute sense as a badass thing to say in the sense of, you know, uh, I have this in Chicago. I have this advantage, and Chicago is where I won the WWE title and took it home with me, and all of that. And it didn't occur to me that what he was saying was in Chicago. I have the love of all of these fans on my side, and you can't there's nothing you can do that's gonna override that. That's I hadn't looked at it that way. That's really interesting. Um,
Yeah,
let's see.
and then of
Go
course,
ahead.
yeah, of course, with the whole with this connection to a city, that is actually, I didn't even think of that, but in punk rock, like in specifically in like the hardcore punk scenes, you will oftentimes have like a specific connection between a band and a particular city or particular style. Like you'll have like
You want to
New
be true
York
to your
hard,
local scene.
yeah, your local scene, like certain bands will be specifically connected to like New York hardcore, for example, as being a separate identity from West Coast. And CM Punk, obviously, he has the strong connection with Chicago, and that emotional participatory connection with the fans is even strengthened more by the fact that he is in because he is in his hometown, and that kind of participation and that sense of connection and community is definitely something you would see within an individual local punk rock scene, and you see him masterfully executing that even up to this huge scale of 15,000 people.
Hmm. And the good timing on that. That was the next item that I was going to talk about, was to ask Grayson, is there anything else that you would want to expand on about the relationship between CM Punk and punk culture and the ethos of punk?
Yeah, yes, thank you. In with how he came in, of course, you have the emotional connection there between CM Punk and the fans, and that is certainly, and going out there, hugging, crowd surfing. Obviously, those are all types of things that are relatable to that physical contact, that participatory nature of a punk rock show. And then, of course, you have the sense of we, that punk rock is very participatory. That part of the culture of it is that everybody is equal. The performer on the stage is no greater of a person necessarily than the fans. And the way he kept emphasizing that is a definite callback to the ideas of punk rock, that sort of egalitarian idea of punk rock. And then the way he talks about how he how he left professional wrestling when he went into WWE, and how he couldn't heal in an environment that was making him sick. Um, that also goes to the area of a lot of what drives punk culture's rebellion, which it's not just rebellion for the sake of rebellion, it's for a specific purpose. And that specific purpose, one of those specific purposes, is oftentimes um, workers' rights and problems in bad workplaces. And of course, it behooves AEW to say things about their competitors that aren't very good, but those are all very obvious things about WWE that are very clear and apparent. And how he explains that he needs to be, and that he likes this environment way better, and that he's coming because of the people there within AEW as opposed to this toxic WWE environment. That's a message that, coming from a guy like CM Punk, is very powerful in terms of the audience, and showing them, well, look, you can be the best in the world and you can still be negatively impacted by a toxic workplace. You can be this great person and still say, put your foot down and say, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to go. I'm going to take a break for 7 years. Go away from this environment and look for the community that I actually want, that has what that has the things that I want in in a workplace, and form a better connection and community. Because a lot of times people will be seen as being weak for or soft because of things that happen in their workplace, things that happen to them that are injustices, things that are not right. I know this is very minor compared to the many myriad of things that people experience in their everyday lives, the actual working class experiences. But of course, this is a story. This is a story that we're telling. This
Yeah.
is a this is a story, but it has that powerful implication for those
Mm.
sitting there in the audience, saying, yes, that can be me, and I can have the same triumphant comeback.
Grayson.
And that's one of the inspiring very, very well, and so subtly and gentle, that it's not just overt and obvious and and full blown propagandizing, like something like I would do. And that really impresses me about CM Punk.
Yeah, that I think that it's a really good point that that with pro wrestling you have something that is both story and reality, and they're mixed in very subtle ways. And you can have I mean, the real life of CM Punk. He had his troubles and he made the choices he made, that has to inform the story that they're telling, the fictional story that they're telling, because these are the kinds of the stories that they tell are based in their real lives, and they kind of always are. It's no way to completely separate.
Yeah.
And and just because you may say, well, you know, CM Punk's troubles aren't really. I mean, he's still a millionaire. He already had made his money. He didn't need to, whatever. Uh, but also, you can still relate to it on a certain level, and uh, it's also a story. They're also telling a story, and a story that can be related to by someone in any kind of a similar situation, even if it's only similar in some ways.
Precisely, and that's the thing is, and being in having prior experience in political communications, being in an environment where I was around nice people but were pushing a bad ideology. One of the things that I've kind of learned, and people sometimes will get a little too literal about these kinds of things, where they're like, well, look, CM Punk's, and I've seen reactions to my article, which my
Mhm.
article, obviously, you can go to the prowrestlingmusings.com website and read that. But the you'll see reactions like, oh, well, CM Punk is a millionaire. This is a company funded by a billionaire. Why would you listen to this? You see different people in the political field. They're like, why the heck are these activists that are saying that they're for the common people? How come they're making high incomes? And to that, I literally, like, I've kind of established like a sets of rules from sports, things I've learned from the time different sports I've looked at that apply to political communication. And the lesson that I learned from pro wrestling is embrace the kayfabe, embrace that this is, to an extent, being it's both a real story, but there's also an element of fictionalization here, and just embrace it, this because you're creating power with these stories. You're creating power because of that very aspect, that CM Punk is as wealthy as he is. That's validation. Don't take it as he's not on your side. Take it as validation, and basically go. I just encourage people to just go with it and not nitpick, and let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Because if this was in some indie wrestling show in the middle of nowhere, this speech was given, would it have had the impact that it had? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
But we create that impact because we choose to embrace the kayfabe rather than reject it out of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Another area of pushback that had on the whole, is CM Punk is more of the cultural musical one. It just felt like some people who read your article um, have an idea, a very narrow idea of punk, just from like their punk scene is punk. Whatever punk they had in their high school, that's what punk means, and it can't mean anything else. It's like, well, if you narrow it enough, you can gatekeep anything. But I mean, obviously, CM Punk came from a punk scene, a specific punk scene that may not be anybody else's punk scene, but the straight edge one. uh you mentioned something about how the relationship in your article. You mentioned a little bit about the relationship between the lyrics of particular bands that were of that scene, and CM Punk's words and philosophy. Why don't you expand on that a little bit more, Grayson?
Yeah, so CM Punk, I've seen him like in photos, kind of had a relationship with H2O, which was in the punk rock, which is in that hardcore punk straight edge scene. And I think that a lot, and then I basically I wanted to bring out the lyrics from the song "What Happened," because that song talks about basically that people that are punk rock, but they're not actually but they're basically playing punk, they're basically playing punk rock, but they really aren't. They're effectively posers, but they think that they're actually the people that are better because they have the tougher aesthetic, and they just have this very nihilistic, just wanting to be aggressive kind of view of the world. And in terms of how CM Punk comes out, it's not that same level of aggression. It's strength, but it's not overt aggression, which is what there certain factions think is punk rock. And he has the one of the lines that song's "Passion before fashion." CM Punk is obviously the passion, not necessarily in the same fashion as you think of like this sort of aggression. And
Hmm.
then, of course, you have the different stylistic areas of punk rock with CM Punk's callbacks to about the negative workplace. Of course, you have a lot of bands that have politically charged lyrics, like Anti-Flag would agree about that particular topic. um, and then you have a lot of times you will there's a lot of emotion. Especially, the thing is that some of the pop punk bands and emo bands that have more emotion to them, sometimes they do get rejected as being not punk rock enough, too commercial on those grounds. But it is definitely a part of the culture. Emotional expression is definitely part of the culture. And you can tell that from what CM Punk is saying, that it does line up. If you take a holistic view of punk rock, there's this very narrow view of punk rock that some
Hmm.
people are like, well, it's only extreme aggression, just go out and vandalize stuff, just do stuff that looks tough and get in fights and stuff like that. But that really isn't what it is. It has a purpose to it. And that's what I want to call out to those H2O lyrics, because it's not just an aesthetic, it's an aesthetic with a purpose. And CM Punk really focused on purpose in that speech.
Sure. It makes me think of just only a few years ago, really, for me, discovering the difference between what real anarchists believe and the popular idea of what anarchism is. Just
Yeah.
it's like, what? You're not an anarchist. You're a hippie. That's the opposite. Like the Sex Pistols would not approve of you. And then I, just got learned more about it and realized, like, oh, okay, this was the original. It's kind of the uh, uh, the Sex Pistols direction of it was kind of a short term. Like, I mean, what they did made sense in their context. They were
Correct.
reacting to something that was very harmful, and it brought out that rage, and that rage is also valid. And I think that also relates back to CM Punk, because his earlier work addresses rage a lot. The rage towards injustice, and that's one,
Using
that's one stage, and then another stage is getting beyond that a little bit, and a feeling of acceptance and gratitude that you got from him in this stage of CM Punk.
course. Yeah, and what you're saying about anarchism and all that, that's a journey that I've gone through quite a bit. I was on the board of directors of Tea Party Youth, a conservative organization, it's a conservative political movement here in the
That's so
United
crazy to
States.
me to find out about you. I
Yeah,
remember.
I was on the board of directors of Tea Party Youth. I was journalism leader at Tea Party Patriots, and even had a an interview where I was with Steve Bannon of the Trump administration fame and shame back in 2012. And I was writing articles about how I don't understand why punk rockers aren't conservative, because look, anarchism is limited government, and conservatives are limited government, but Democrats aren't. I when I started studying skateboarding culture over at USC, when I was doing my political science degree, I was trying to figure out, oh yeah, okay, how do we turn them into conservatives? Because look, they have this super independent culture, but they're still in the hands of the Democrats. But then I didn't understand that you can have both creative independence and a communitarian um, bent, that you still care about your own community and working collectively while still maintaining a high level of independence. I was always taught from what I knew about politics that, okay, yes, the you have on one end you have freedom, and on one end you have this communism or being super communitarian, that the two don't mix. But the
Mhm.
lesson is that the two actually do mix, and that led to so many things opening up in my own minds, and started to drop the fear of being judged and all of that. And having an example and having a sport like pro wrestling here, where you're fighting for something, it's kind of like, I've watched pro wrestling and I feel like I've improved my confidence in my abilities to speak about things, just by watching and seeing people that are courageously going out there and standing up for what they believe.
So, Peter, I don't know how much of this punk stuff is something that you have anything to say about. Is there a different? I know that the punk scene is so different in Britain versus America, but is there a different British spin that you would have on CM Punk's relationship with punk culture?
Honestly, I mean, Grayson, I think, said everything that I couldn't, because I mean, like, when you think of, I mean, let's be honest, when it comes to the British, it's probably Sex Pistols is probably the main band. I think it's interesting listening to about the whole philosophy of punk culture back in the 70s, where with the Sex Pistols and how they were standing up to stuffy old Britain. And if you ever seen the old clips of Johnny Rotten saying swear words on the BBC, and how iconic that moment is. The reason it was so iconic is because it was completely different to what the norm was. But it was
Mm.
interesting listening to Grayson's points about the culture. I mean, I really could not add anything of note. That Grayson completely was fantastic there. I really enjoyed listening to everything he said there. Learned so much. So yeah, credit to Grayson. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Uh,
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
I appreciate. Yes, thank you. I appreciate your words, and I appreciate that I was able to give you a little bit of information on it, because it really is a deeper history than the average citizen would think. And I really appreciate when people get to know that and get to understand it. It's my pleasure.
All right. Now, at this point, I was going to talk about the promo point by point, but as we've gone along, we've actually hit several of them. But let's take a look at it and see which ones we haven't yet talked about, specific bits of it. One is where Punk says to the crowd when they begin to chant his name again, that he's heard it for 7 years. He's heard it. He heard you, and that just that affirmation that he had been listening to all of the Punk chants that had been occurring in all that intervening time.
yeah, no, I think, yeah, I think it was just kind of like it was something he couldn't ignore. I mean, it's I don't know he was very I thought what's the word I'm looking for. I think he's admitted that he didn't watch wrestling for a long period of time. I think he even mentioned during the media scrum he blamed Renee, John Moxley's wife, for bringing him back to pro wrestling, and when he came back, he still heard the chants. He probably looked online and he always saw, when are you coming back? Who do you want to face? What are you gonna? What do you think of AEW? What do you think of this? And he knew there was still an appetite for him, and again, I'm leaping way too far. We're going to talk about Wednesday, but you know, he mentioned talking about all that stuff. Got the emotions stirring. Got the wheels turning in his head. Has he still got it? That's what That's what
Sure.
he was thinking. So when so that point about like I've heard you, he heard the song. He didn't quite hear them because he had completely taken himself out of wrestling, apart from I think AJ's matches. I think he mentioned.
Uh-huh.
Even I'm guessing when AJ wrestled, CM Punk chants were going on still because of obvious reasons. But he's just when he's on Twitter and he sees all those questions going to him, he must have got the wheels turned in his head. He must have.
All right. Yep. That's one perspective on it. Did you have anything to say about that, Grayson?
Well, it's a matter of I think that yes, I think that for him he was trying to avoid it. Like you can tell with the way he said that the environment was sort of messing with his mental health. From my own personal experience, things I've gone through, people who have done me wrong, organizations that have done me wrong in the past, there is sort of a mental block to it. But at some point, you get to, and I'm starting to get to that a little bit. I think one of the points I covered in my Adam Page article was the whole Adam Page monologue where he was talking about like going home and like they needed to have unfinished business. You get to a point where in your mind you're like, okay, can I go back to this? Is there an opportunity for me to go back to this because this is something I had my whole identity and I have my whole life in? Is there a way for me to do this positively and have learned the lessons that I've learned? And I think at some point it just probably built up in him. Okay, this is the place. What I'm seeing here, what I'm hearing here with AEW works well with me. Of course, there are all kinds of motivations, all kinds of business considerations, things like that. But um, that mental block is longstanding, but it's not impenetrable from when you've had some sort of trauma in your life or you've had a bad experience. There is that block, but there is sort of that stronger identity, that central identity of who you are and what you want to do and what your purpose is in life. And that's what he's referring to. And he sees that sort of purpose in developing young talent. Of course, there's still that self doubt that he acknowledges. The self doubt that he doesn't know if he could actually wrestle as well as some of these people. But that's a typical internal conflict you have when you have something that serious, that traumatic in your life. And now he's come to a point where he wants to take it on, and I can totally sympathize with that because I've gotten to that point myself. And I'm glad he's found the place, and I'm glad that we get to be witness to it.
This is so crazy to me. We're talking about three words, and we all have completely different perspectives on it. Um, I was like,
Sounds like a law school class.
That's the beauty of it. It's kind of like there's something that when I was trying to describe the depression, it's kind of like I always compare it to sort of but explaining the premise of BoJack Horseman. It makes sense to you when you explain what the premise of BoJack Horseman is, but when you explain it, they look at you and just go, "Eh." It's kind of like that. That everyone's mental health is very different, and the reasons why it's not as good as depression is what it is. It just it's hard talking about your depression. I thought listening to Punk on Friday night talk about his mental health and about how it had been so cut up in pieces by his experiences in the past was moving. It really was.
For sure. for sure. But going back to the three words I was talking about, I heard you. Like
But
I threw it to each of you, thinking like, oh well, they're going to say what I was going to say, and I'll skip it. But no, it's like you had a completely different perspective on what he meant by that. For Peter, it was, you know, I heard you calling for me to get back in the ring. You know that like, hey, want you back, and Grayson had that other perspective, but to me, it's like th- the thing about when him saying "I heard you" is that he's reemphasizing that community that he feels he has with his fans, and that he understood what they were saying when they chanted CM Punk, because you'll note, um, even in the lead up to this, you didn't have disruptive CM Punk chants in AEW shows. They chanted CM Punk when he was hinted at a couple times, and that's it. That you don't have, and if you go back to WWE, to other promotions, mainly WWE, where you have CM Punk chants breaking out at times that aren't really appropriate or helpful for the show, it's been a case of CM Punk is a chant that to the fans means this show sucks. I feel like you think I'm stupid. That you think that I would be entertained by this. What is this crap? Give us CM Punk, because that would be good. And that's what I feel like CM Punk is saying that he heard. He heard that they wanted him back because they want something good, and they know that he represents that. I mean, don't get me wrong. AEW was already to some extent giving them that, but this only takes that to another level.
Yeah, the
yeah,
protest, the protest, the rallying cry of the protest was heard, and he's there to come in and join them and handle what the grievance of the public is. It's the victory end of the punk struggle.
Hmm. Now, the next thing that he says in the same breath, practically, is that he's not going to have time that night to say everything he has to say, and that he is going to be basically on every show. For me, this is just him emphasizing that as much as you might expect or might seem that this is going to be a Brock Lesnar coming back or a Rock coming back kind of a deal, that's not him. That's not what he's doing, which is interesting because he could tell the story of the guy who complained about the thing and now has turned into that thing, which is the story John Cena tells pretty effectively, I think, at sometimes, of, I complained about The Rock and now I've turned into The Rock. He could tell that story and it would be a good story, but he did not want to go that direction. He did not want to be the part-time guy who Darby Allin is calling out for being everything he used to complain about.
yeah.
Like,
I think. Sorry. Well, if he's going to be on every show, does that mean we're going to get the dream match of CM Punk versus Luther then on Dark Elevation?
he did not mention Mondays and Tuesdays. I should not have said as the show, but he did mention Wednesdays, Fridays, and 4 weekend days each year of the pay-per-views.
Yeah, and also I'm guessing that I'm guessing the specials as well on TNT when they come about.
Hmm.
I'm guessing those as well. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
no. I think you're completely right. I think he wants to. He feels. I think he talks about we again. What we talked about earlier. It's a team effort. It feels like with Punk and AEW.
Now, actually, before I move on, Grayson, did you have anything about that, about him being full time and emphasizing the fact that he's full time?
Um, not really, but I do think that is a distinction there, because you could also go the route of having him as sort of a manager,
Hmm.
within AEW, and providing mentorship. But I think that he is showing that he has more of a dual role, that he is going to be actively involved, that he loves being around the young talent, but he is also still primarily a wrestler, and that's an interesting, very very interesting distinction.
Yeah, absolutely. He has said, I believe, in the media scrum that he's going to have a role both in front of and behind the camera, and that's really cool. And as he gets a little older and feels that he needs to wind things down, he may be moving into that mentorship role, that role of being the agent, that sort of thing. But at this time, he's a full-time wrestler, and that's awesome. Now, the next section of the promo, he is apologizing, both apologizing and explaining and talking about how he could not. As much as people may have been disappointed by the years that he was away, he couldn't continue where he was. Um, uh, we actually already kind of talked about a lot of that. I think it's really interesting that he felt it was worthwhile to. Well, he didn't actually say the words that he apologized, but that he understands that he holds no grudge against them for holding a grudge or for feeling, the way he phrases it, if my personal choices disappointed you, oh, the way that's phrased sounds like you're going to say it's none of your business. But he said, no, I understand how you might feel that way. But uh, does anybody have anything that they want to say that hasn't already been said about this part?
I, you know, he didn't need to say it. He didn't. He didn't. I don't think he needed to say anything to the Chicago fans because I would imagine that a lot of those people in that arena understand.
Hmm.
But the fact that he felt he needed to say that maybe shows you again the whole team effort. It's about us, and like maybe he felt that he needed to make that step and apologize when he really didn't need to, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Because I think
Again,
a lot of people who actually understand the Punk story and listen to the podcasts with Colt. It was interesting. I think at one point during that there was a little Colt chant, wasn't there? In that period, wasn't there? We apologised for making the mistake. Maybe I misheard that, but
I don't know.
obviously we all know about the Punk cult history, and it's
Right.
maybe not as great as it used to be. I think a lot of people presumed that that's what he was referring to.
Yeah. Oh, that's an interesting point. I never really thought about it, but that when he says that if anybody in the back, anybody who works here is let down, that he may have been referring specifically to his former friend and hopefully friends again, Colt Cabana. Um, and that's the thing, is that both Colt and CM Punk, I think people may not realize that they're not just guys who met on the road, that just knew each other from both being wrestling stars. They were trainees together. They came up from the beginning together. They're both guys who learned to wrestle in a Chicago wrestling training center together, and came up in the indies, in the local Chicago indies together, and both kind of made it big in the indies. Only one made it very big beyond the indies, but you know, it's a lot like, it kind of reminds me of the actor from Breaking Bad, the main one.
Paul
Hmm?
or Jesse Paul? Oh god, I know you're about Cranston, Bryan
Yes,
Cranston.
Bryan Cranston. Thank you.
Yeah.
It reminds me of what Bryan Cranston says in almost every interview, that like, uh, when he worked local theater, he that there were actors he worked with that were better than he is, and that there's a lot of luck. There's a lot of uh, of coincidence involved in who makes it big and who doesn't, and that on every level of from small time to big time, that there's a lot of talent out there, and that just because you made it big, you shouldn't assume that it's just I'm you just shouldn't get too big of a head about it. And I'm sure that I feel that CM Punk feels the same way, that he knows people on every level that have succeeded, or that have left wrestling and only did so much, that had tons of talent, uh that's a big part of why he wants to work with young people, is to help them get to that next level, that he knows they have the talent they ought to. um let's see. Okay, now the next thing, I think that gets missed a lot, is that, because it's just a throwaway line. He says, "Can I tell you guys a story?" Do people recognize what that's a callback to?
Go ahead.
You know, nobody? Okay. In the original Pipe Bomb, that's practically the end. He does the whole pipe bomb story
Oh God, yes!
and then says,
I watched that a couple of weeks ago as well. Oh
"Can I tell
yes.
you guys a story?" He says that quote, "Can I tell you guys a story?" And then he starts to launch into a story about bullying, or
Brilliant.
about the anti-bullying program. And I assume he was going to talk about how ironic it is that they had one, considering all the bullying that goes on. Um, and that's when his mic gets cut off. And it's just interesting that it feels like this is this is our opportunity to hear CM Punk with his mic not being cut off. And I think that's the significance of calling back to that line.
Yeah, he didn't need to bring backup. He didn't need to bring up his backup megaphone.
Oh, I forgot the megaphone. Like you've turned my microphone off. I have this. Yes.
Yeah, I actually wrote a column about that. I wrote a column about that pipe bomb. I completely forgot about that. When, yeah, wow, yeah, that's a good spot. Wow.
All right. Let's see. Now, moving forward. Let's see. Now, the next section is where he talks about leaving Ring of Honor. And the way that he phrases it is that he left professional wrestling, uh, making a veiled inference about the fact that the WWE does not refer to what they do as professional wrestling. Generally, they refer to it as sports entertainment. And he just says, I will agree. What you do is not professional wrestling. I had to leave professional wrestling in order to for my career, but I wasn't happy to do so. And now after not 7 years, but what is it, 15 years, I'm really back in professional wrestling. Go ahead.
Yeah, I first thing is people criticizing Punk for actually saying that. Obviously there was the Booker T podcast and
Yes.
his take about it, and I just looking on Twitter even now. I just like looking at people even commenting, about that. WWE have don't call themselves professional wrestling. There's a famous story in the late 80s where Ted Turner calls up Vince McMahon to say, I'm in the wrestling business. And
Yes.
Vince McMahon's reply is, you might be in the wrestling business, I'm in the entertainment business. WWE for 30 years, or even longer than that, 35 years, have not been in the professional wrestling business. By their admission, they are sports entertainment. That's Vince McMahon called himself sports entertainment to get past state commissions, to make themselves sellable to TV networks, to get them in big arenas, to to make sure that fans who thought wrestling was a dirty word went, oh, sport, for some reason would go, oh, sports entertainment, that must be better. So it wasn't okay. Some people took it as an insult, but if you take that as an insult, you haven't looked at your wrestling history. It, it was the truth. I really wasn't an insult in my eyes because he did leave professional wrestling to
Hmm.
join sports entertainment. It is the way WWE look at the world of wrestling, as I call it.
Well, have you? That's well. The other question I'd ask those people is: have you ever been in a position in your life where you're doing something but you don't feel like your soul is in it? And
Hmm.
that's another way of looking at it is that WWE has this very mechanized process. McMahon himself is like, okay, we're gonna create this system to develop these young wrestlers into what we want them to be instead of the creative freedom that you'd have within an organization like AEW. So if his soul is checked out of it, that's what he's calling back to, is that his soul was out of it as he was mechanically producing this product um, in this fashion that this company wanted it to do.
painting by the numbers.
Sure. Now, another
Yep.
perspective. Sure, sure. Another perspective on it is that, you could say that, well, how can you take it as an insult? That's the term you chose for yourself. But on the flip side, from Punk's perspective, from a pro wrestling fan's perspective that maybe isn't a fan of the sports entertainment idea like us, uh, from our perspective, it does look like an insult, and it was intended to be a backhanded way of being a sort of insult. And I thought it was interesting the way that he did it. He didn't do it by directly saying anything about where he went to, other than that it wasn't professional wrestling. The rest was just left implied. And I think it's really interesting that he did it that way, because it's a lot like the way that that the WWE would just ignore a lot of people when they come in. Certain parts of their career would just be forgotten. Like, for instance, Sting. When Sting came in, they acted as if he had been wandering the desert for 10 years or whatever it was, with no acknowledgement that he had spent a good part of his career after WCW, doing his very best to build TNA up as a genuine competitive brand to WWE. Wasn't successful, but it had its moments where it looked like it might have been.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, listening back to WWE and their treatment of other promotions. It was like, I think CM Punk mentions Ring of Honor in that pipe bomb promo. It was like the second time it had ever been mentioned, that organization, on WWE TV. WWE TV have their, it's their world, and then there's another professional wrestling world, and they'll very rarely mention other promotions unless it suits them. And the stories that they're telling, like AJ Styles when he came in, he was New Japan Pro Wrestling superstar. AJ Styles never mentioned
Mm-hmm.
TNA.
Yeah,
It's just like the way they do it.
being willing to mention New Japan allowed them to say a place that AJ Styles was from, other than mentioning TNA, which was convenient for them, and kind of a big way that one of the ways that his time in New Japan made AJ a hell of a lot more marketable than he was right after leaving TNA. It's really kind of amazing what he did with his career, although obviously way off topic.
Oh,
No, it's my fault for going in that direction. Just so going back to Punk's promo. Let's see. I'm looking at the next paragraph. The thing that stands out for me, and feel free if anything else stands out for you, is him saying that there's a couple of scores to settle in the locker room. Now, I assume that that's not referring to anything shoot. That's pure kayfabe of there are people that I've interacted with within storylines, and we can pick up some of those storylines in the future if we decide we want to go with that way with the stories. I'm assuming that's what he meant by that. What do you all think?
my first thought was John Moxley.
Sure.
That was my first thought, because I think, if I remember, I saw something on Twitter, a little clip about, I think it was a Punk Shields kind of like in-ring entertainment segment, I think, and as they call it. And yeah, I think he was kind of like saying, he was like saying, I'm going to pick a fight with one of you three. And then Dean Ambrose, as he was known then, was going up and said, oh no, not you, Dean. I've beaten you. I want either Roman or Seth. It was a very, actually quite a cool moment to actually watch back. It's kind of like, that's you can imagine in pro wrestling canon that John Moxley is still pissed off about that moment, and he'll want to take on Punk. Maybe there's a dynamic there. There's Jericho.
Mm-hmm.
That's another kayfabe score to settle, I guess. I mean, I'd love to look at the AEW roster and see who else there is that he is cross swords with in AEW or even Ring of Honor. I mean, there's probably people in AEW that he's come across in AEW that he's come across in Ring of Honor or even IWA Mid South. It'd be interesting to see who those people are. I mean, it'd be quite interesting.
For sure. Yeah, that's something we should look at. Just like, is there anyone we're forgetting that he's had interactions with in the indies, or in a little storyline that we may have forgotten about when they were both in WWE or Ring of Honor or whatever. Of course, that also leads to who is not yet on the roster. Our Bryan Danielson speculation, who of course he had huge feuds with, mostly in Ring of Honor, but also somewhat in WWE. Now, I believe that our guest Grayson needs to get going. He has shared his thoughts on a punk culture and how that relates to all of this, and we're certainly glad to have had him. Why don't Grayson? Why don't you give the listeners, whatever listeners we may have, the all the scoop on how to find your work, or remind them, as you did mention it at the beginning
Yeah.
as well.
Yes, well, yes, and thank you for thank you, Sergey and Peter, for having me. Um, yes, the listeners can find me at fixerpunk.com, fixerpunk.com. They can look for the Fixer Punk podcast, which covers sort of the nexus between politics, culture, and personal development. If you're at all enthralled by AEW storylines and it's inspired you in any way, there's a lot of interesting stuff that you'll find on the podcast. And if you want to learn a little bit more about these ideas, you'll love Fixer Punk Podcast, available on all platforms. Find me on Twitter at Grayson Nation, GreysonNation. Also on TikTok at Fixer Punk. Thank you so much for having me. And I look forward to speaking again with both of you soon.
Awesome, Grayson. Thanks so much for being on.
Thank you.
All right, it is just you and me for a little bit more time, Peter. I have to admit I am old and do not have a TikTok.
I tried it. I tried it for like 2 weeks and I just deleted it. So yeah, I'm in the same boat as you, mate. I'm in the same boat.
All right, so let's see. Now, going back to the promo, I this promo I love so much, and that's why I'm dissecting it, paragraph by paragraph.
Oh, by the way,
Go ahead.
I just thought of a name for settling our scores. Do you know who gave CM Punk a really nasty Samoan drop during the 2014 Royal Rumble?
Tell me.
Somebody by the name of Alexander Rusev.
Oh, so they never had a match, but did interact
They had a
in
little
the Rumble.
altercation, if I remember right. I swear that they had an altercation at 2014. I'm actually trying to look at whether or not that gave him his concussion.
That's really interesting.
If it did, that's a story to tell. I'm just looking at it up right now whether or not Rusev gave it when he got the concussion, because I know Rusev was in the. Obviously, CM Punk started at 1 and went right till the end.
Right.
If I remember rightly, and Rusev was in that match, came in quite early, and I think he had he was throwing people around for like 5 minutes before getting eliminated, and Punk must have been thrown around in that match. I swear to God, he took a Samoan drop in that match. I'm certain he did, and I'm just trying to think whether or not it gave him that concussion that night, which of course led to things spiraling out of control in the relationship between Punk and WWE the next night. So it's just quite like you can. I mean, that's a score to settle. I mean, that moment ended up with 18 months of WWE making his life hell. So as Punk, is that a score to settle with Miro? That'd be interesting. And I can't imagine Punk and Kingston must have had some kind of altercation in the independent scene. They must have had. That's a score to be settled, surely.
Well, even if it's not, that's certainly a matchup to look forward to,
And
or
the
even more so
promos,
a promo battle. Yes.
yeah, I was going to say, yeah, the promos would be quite fun.
Now, I just when you mentioned Miro, once known as Rusev, I just can't. It's just making me think of Punk as TNT champion. It's just like that would be so bizarre.
Ah,
But the next thing that he goes on to talk about is his next actual feud, or his first feud that he is moving into with Darby Allin, and that's what he's talking about is Darby Allin doing a great job of selling Darby Allin's character, an understanding of Darby Allin's character and what it's about the embrace of danger, and all of that. And he uses that great line that we already talked about, that there's nothing more dangerous than wrestling CM Punk in Chicago, and that connection there. It's interesting though, in that same paragraph, he gives such a cheap pop to Chicago even before that, where he says that Darby Allin is tough, just like everybody in Chicago. It's like that is the cheapest pop I've ever heard. It's just so like, okay, you just going straight for it.
But it also plays into his relationship with Chicago. It's,
Mhm.
again, watching that Money in the Bank match against Cena in 2011 for my column about some more Punk 2. It was quite. If you want watching that match, he's Tommy Rich in Atlanta. He's doing the fire up. He's like, he's doing all the old cliche 1980s baby face stuff in Chicago, and he's the complete opposite of that. So I thought that was quite interesting to like when you're watching that match. He is the ultimate babyface in Chicago when he says stuff like that. It's not it seems very out of character for him to be that cheesy babyface,
Mhm.
but it actually isn't because when he's in Chicago, when he's in Chi-Town, he's a completely different person.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He does come across as almost cheesy, but it has an authenticity because he has that
Mm.
relationship for sure. Now, uh, let's see. The final thing, the last thing in the promo is um I use the word apology, and he never actually says I apologize. It's not an apology, but more of an appreciation of your patience. I appreciate your patience, and this is what he says at the very end: is the appreciation that they had that patience and that they still care after 7 years, and he's going to show that appreciation with ice cream bars. And it's funny, not everybody got that line. I was surprised that I had to explain to some like what that's a callback to. Um,
Even
that
I got that
being
one.
that being the sorry, Craig. That being the the WW ice cream bars in his kayfabe negotiations with Vince McMahon was like, hey, I've got you over a barrel. You want me under contract? Uh, I have these demands, and his demands were mostly silly, and in a way that says, I don't care about the same things that uh, that you expect me to care about. I'm not here for um, the most money or the private jet. I'm here out of love, and one of the ways to express that is, hey, why shouldn't the fans get something cool? And an ice cream bar would be a cool thing for the fans. And then in the scrum, in the media scrum, he says, this was the easiest home run ever hit because it was all set up for me. All I had to do was pay off what I had set up, and he does that.
Yeah, I think it's. Yeah, I think it's one of my favourite ever moments in just the entrance is one of my favourite moments in pro wrestling history. The promo is just fire. It's just I think it's to end it on the ice cream bars. It's a nod and a wink to what happened 10 years ago. It's a nod, it's and who doesn't like free stuff?
I
Who
mean,
doesn't like free stuff? Free
and
ice cream. What's wrong with free ice? Nothing wrong with free ice cream. Apparently, they're really good. It's really good ice cream. Everyone gave it really good reviews.
well,
So
this
and
was
it was an independent place in Chicago, wasn't it? It was
Mhm,
like which he saw out. They're going to get a ton of buzz from that.
mhm.
It's again. It goes to Punk and Chicago coming together. It's helping independent businesses in Chicago. It's just the whole love in between the town and Punk and the fans and Punk. It plays perfectly into it.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, one of the dumb criticisms that on Reddit that I saw about Grayson's piece on punk culture and CM Punk was, oh well, commercialism. That's not punk. The commercialism of ice cream bars is like that just portrays not knowing what really happened there. This is one guy going to a local small business and saying, here, this is a thing I want to do for my fans. How can we make this happen? Nothing
Yeah.
commercialism about that.
If
I
you,
mean,
if
what's
you
the
got,
opposite of commercialism is giving away stuff.
yeah, I mean, like, yeah, if it had been like, do you guys have Magnum in the USA? The Magnum bars, do you have that?
Oh yeah, sure, I know what you mean.
Yeah, it's like if you gave away Magnum bars, then that's a good point. That is commercialism gone mad, but it was an independent place, and that's who had probably suffered through COVID times, and it's giving them a big boost. It's it's Reddit. I'm not on Reddit, so I don't for a reason.
So, um, uh, while I was preparing for this podcast, I came across on Reddit. It's good for some things. I came across a really great article by a fellow I'd never heard of before, Will Cooling. Usually, when I make a reference to an article, it's by one of us, a pro wrestling musings person. But this is something on Substack that I came across about CM Punk's promo and making comparisons between that and Ric Flair's return promo when he came back to WCW after doing that retirement angle that wasn't completely an angle because they weren't really sure if they'd be able to work out their contract and have him come back. Um, I thought it was really interesting. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it. I linked it when we, but
I'm looking at it right now, so I'd love to go through it. Yeah, I mean, it's quite. I mean, it's again, that's probably up there with the great on the Mount Rushmore of great pops is Ric Flair's comeback
mhm.
at night. I think it's kind of like you talk about euphoria and how it's the man versus the machine, and I think it's one of those when it came to Punk, it was the emotion at the time, and it's the hometown of Flair, wasn't it? It was in Charlotte,
Yep.
and yeah, it's quite interesting if you look at it. And also, there's a lot of people in around that time thought Flair was never coming back to WCW. You know, the relationship between Flair and Bischoff was completely irreparable at that time, and it was a massive shock when and also it was a massive shock if you think about it at that time, but also the way that segment built up with the introduction of Malenko and Benoit and McMichael and Anderson's there, and you're thinking, surely Flair's got to show up. Surely. It's the
Hmm.
biggest anticlimax in the history of pro wrestling if he doesn't. And the way Arn sells it is perfect. It's like, oh my god, I'm getting old, I'm forgetting. Here's Ric Flair, and So there are very good comparisons you can make between the two
Hmm.
segments that
Yep.
way. I
Yep.
never thought of that. I'm going to give that a big read. Actually, yeah, I'll have a look at that. I love the picture of the crying fan, by the way. I still love that picture.
It's a
Um,
wonderful it's a wonderful moment. But yeah, there's a lot of parallels. Just the fact that it was rumored, heavily rumored but not confirmed, and how that built the excitement and the moment in a very similar way, and that it was in the not technically hometown, I don't believe, but in the city that's really closely associated with the wrestler. Um, and
Awesome country, yeah.
Exactly. And then also the fact that it was built around this antagonism between an idea of real wrestling and the idea of a sports entertainment thing as represented by Eric Bischoff then and as represented by the WWE now. In the current story, and the WWE is not technically a part of the story. They never mention it by name, but it's the thing that's the opposite of what we're talking about. Like in opposition, like if you want to understand what we're doing, it's not what they're doing. Um, let's see, and now there was another section that I wanted to bring up. The character arc of CM Punk, in the sense of there are a lot of callbacks in this promo, and it kind of emphasizes how in previous promos he was portraying a different moment in his character arc in a really interesting way. Like in in the pipe bomb, the famous pipe bomb promo, he is depicting someone who is angry at injustices that he sees and wants to speak out against injustice. And then, like in the promo with the ice cream bars, uh, you've got someone who is recognizing their own value and is not willing to let anybody tell him that he's not worth what he knows he's worth. Or similarly, in that big in that famous boxing with God promo against The Rock, just I'm someone who knows how good I am and isn't willing to say that because you're a legend, I'm not on that same level or even above that level. And then and now I feel like he's the same character, but just at a very different moment in his character arc, where he's gone through all of that, and now he's in this really amazing moment of just gratitude um, and acceptance of everything that he's been through and where he's at now.
He's got a second chance at he's got a second chance at a career basically, and it feels like it's interesting. Like I think he knows in his head he's not as young as he was. He's not as fast as he was. He's not. He's all these kind of. He's not.
Mhm.
He's not the CM Punk in kayfabe. When he said he was the best in the world in 2011, here in kayfabe, he had a legit point to make on that because he was up there with Cena and Orton on win-loss records, and just looking at that, and when you look at like in 2021, he's not. He doesn't know if he's the best in the world, and his beard's grayer than what it was. It's the what if moments in his head stirring, and he used that more in the Schiavone interview on
Right.
Wednesday, which we'll get to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Has he got one more? Was it? It's something I heard years ago when talking about Muhammad Ali and the Larry Holmes fight. Has he got one more miracle left in him?
Hmm.
That's what this AEW one is about. Has he got another miracle in him, basically?
For sure, that's definitely part of the story. But I feel like at the same time, maybe a little less in kayfabe, but more of a shoot, that Punk feels that slowing down a little bit doesn't matter as much for him as it would for someone who was more about moves and agility than when they were in their prime, where he's always been more of a storyteller, and that's something that doesn't go away. I mean, he's just like,
Yeah.
I know I haven't been wrestling matches. I have what's the card? I have a bump card.
Yeah.
You're familiar with for any listeners who aren't familiar with what they mean by a bump card, what they mean by that is there's only so many bumps you can take. Once your card is full, you're done. So, every bump you take needs to be worth it. And by bump, that
Yeah.
means falling flat on your back. There's only so many times in your life you can do that before you're just going to be done. And how many times is going to vary from person to person. It's very different for Ric Flair than it was for,
Yeah.
I don't know, somebody than it was for Bret Hart. And you don't know which you are until you find out.
Yeah.
And that's what CM Punk is saying, is that he's not doesn't need to wrestle practice matches. It's riding a bike, but it's not riding a bike because you're someone who did masterpieces. He has that confidence that, like, you throw me into that situation, I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
I know I can and
Brain's
will.
still there. His
Exactly.
brain's still there.
All right. So another thing that I wanted to talk about was the amazing reaction that segment got, in the sense of just overwhelming buzz, hearing about it from people that you never heard about them. The reaction I got, I'm watching this. I told my spouse, like, hey, I'm watching this. It's like a huge big deal. I'm going to be kind of focused on this for a minute. And, like, I know it's not my usual Wednesday night, but they've got this new show now, et cetera, et cetera. And I hear this shout from the other room that, like, all of my friends online are saying that CM Punk's on TV. Bye. I didn't even know they liked wrestling. So it was just like a lot of that. I don't know if you can share similar experiences.
I mean, the thing is, I'm a bit on an island when it comes to like pro wrestling fandom. Like, I'm a bit on an island right now. It's like everyone who I grew up with who are big wrestling fans. got married, had kids, left me on my own island. I'm watching All Japan Pro Wrestling at 10 o'clock at night on a Tuesday evening.
I
That's my
feel like a
life
lot of
now.
wrestling fans are on their wrestling fan island. And then
Yeah.
that's why you can't be ashamed to wear the merch and stuff, because that's how you find out that other people are into it. You can run into someone you never knew was a wrestling fan if you have some way of letting them know that, like, oh, you like wrestling too. But go on with what you were saying.
I'm gonna test that out next week when I buy my CM Punk shirt.
Right?
So there you go. I'm gonna buy my CM Punk AEW shirt in the next couple of days, so I'm gonna test that out. But no, it was really interesting. So I kind of made. I was joking around earlier. I was joking earlier about the karaoke and not cult of personality. I actually texted it was one of my best friends. It was her birthday on Saturday night, and that was where we were going. I just sent her a text on Saturday morning to just go, is cult of personality on the menu, on the big catalogue menu, just out of curiosity, because I kind of want to do that. And she sent me a text back going, I didn't know much about that song until yesterday. It was just plastered all over my Twitter. And like, it was just like, and this was even mixed like, there's a running joke between me and Sharon about all I'm doing now is basically just plugging pro wrestling musings stuff on Twitter now. That's all my timeline is. But I haven't even mentioned that song. But she's telling me like she's seeing kind of personality trend on Friday afternoon. She's seeing CM Punk trend. All these like everyone. It's a lot of people probably looking on Twitter on Friday going CM Punk Day, and it was just like that's the buzz that was going on. It was just cult of personality. I mean, I heard it during the Arsenal game on Sunday in the English Premier League. They played cult of personality at half time just before they kicked off for the second half. It's just one of those where that song and that for that weekend, that song hit the broke through. I saw it all over Talksport. I saw it all over English tabloid websites. That's the first time I've seen AEW break that mold. The only other time I think I saw something mainstream with AEW was that dud of a bomb in the Omega versus Moxley match. That is the only time I've seen AEW hit the mainstream. Obviously, better to do it.
Well, yes.
I did it on Friday. Obviously, it's just. It's also, I will say this, the buzz is great. It's what you do after the buzz. You just got to hit that train, ride it for as long as you possibly can. And Bryan Danielson coming in, we're going to talk about Danielson later. You got to hit that, it's the next couple of months are going to be interesting. That's for sure.
For sure. And I agree completely. It's so, Punk has such a strange stardom it's so difficult to quantify. If you look at the little movie parts he's had, the little TV parts he's had, he just seems like such a C-list, D-list guy that like, why would getting him, you think of someone who's a big star to bring in, you think of The Rock or Cena, or Batista or Lesnar, who have had roles in major Hollywood movies, who are well known outside of wrestling, or I mean, not in Lesnar's case, but in Lesnar's case, has had major championships in MMA, as opposed to an MMA career that failed pretty miserably. Everything that you would say, that you would quantify this with, would say CM Punk's not that big a deal. I almost understand the people who did not believe that this would be the hit that it was. It was just that there's just this certain something that he has, this buzz that he's able to build about himself that you can't really quantify with well, it's because he was in this movie or he was that or whatever. He's on a show that's not very popular, that's about wrestling on Stars.
Well, I think there was a bit of luck about it, because I'll talk about this in the Summer of Punk column. Is that I think a couple of months before the pipe bomb, Randy Savage died.
Yeah.
And there was and on ESPN and all these like they talked about that. I remember reading about it in English tabloids. I remember on Talksport when this is Talksport here in the UK. They announced Randy Savage's death during the news bulletin. They only ever done that once before. Announced the wrestler's death in a news bulletin in 2007. I think we know who we're talking about.
Yeah,
And
and that's
that's
different.
yeah. And the thing with Savage was because the reason they talked about Savage was because he was a mainstream star, but it's just Savage's death ended up becoming a bit of a mainstream story, and that was because people growing up being wrestling fans when they're growing up were in newsrooms now, and they were talking and and then when Punk hit the pipe bomb, those same people that were reporting on the Savage death and putting it on these on the news sites and the newspapers saw that Punk promo and went, "Did he just shoot on a national wrestling program? Did he just do a shoot promo? Did he just basically slag off his employers?"
Yeah,
And, you know, and
oh
then
sure.
that got a bit of momentum, and it was like Punk was like, was the anti-authority figure, and that's how his stardom really, really rose through that promo. And then it went on, and then obviously he was in the ring with The Rock. Like I think only two. I think the only other person to be in a singles match with The Rock at that time was Cena. So people saw, and that was fame by association. It was those two were together, and Punk was on a roll then, and then he quits that massive public falling out with WWE. It ends up bringing the myth of Punk. Even there's a myth now to him almost.
Yeah.
And 7
And,
years,
it's interesting that his real story eventually kind of mimicked the invented story that they originally that originally the Summer of Punk was going to be about, and that they kind of fumbled. But the beginning of it, everybody was excited about the whole idea of he's going to run off with his championship and how exciting the possibilities of a character doing that on the show. Go ahead. I'm
yeah.
sorry.
No, actually, I mean, I can go on for hours about how they botched that storyline, but we're already running late as it is. But, it's, I think Punk has that, the myth of Punk and the anti-authority label. And, I'll be honest, I mean, I've seen a couple of his movies. They're actually quite good movies, to be fair. There are some really good movies in there. Girl on the Third Floor is a decent movie. That's my hill and I'm dying on it. But, um, but, Punk just has this. He just can't explain. He can't explain it.
Mm-hmm.
He just
No, I
can't.
agree.
And Punk has it.
No, I'm going to go back to what you said at the beginning of that was that part of it may have been some serendipity of Randy Savage's death leading to some wrestling awareness or people thinking about wrestling right before the pipe bomb happened. And that's really ironic. I don't know if people realize one of the projects I've been working on, and I know that you've been paying attention to that my progress on it. Eventually, it'll be ready for the world. Is the Learning Tree project, and once that's out there, one of the things I've got all of the research on the Learning Tree for CM Punk. And he came up in Chicago wrestling, and people may not be aware of this, but that's Randy Savage's territory. That's where the Poffo family got their start, was in Chicago. Uh, uh, CM Punk started in a local indie called Steel Domain and was trained by wrestlers in Steel Domain who were themselves trained by the guy who ran Steel Domain, Sam DeCero, who was known as Supermax when he was an active wrestler, part of a kind of a Road Warriors knockoff called the World Warriors or the Wild Warriors, and in the 80s. Sam DeCero was trained by Randy Savage. So there's a direct connection right there.
Yeah.
He is of the lineage of Randy Savage and has in the past done Randy Savage tributes in doing his flying elbow and things like that, and using his colors and things like that, which I had always assumed before I did this research that it just indicated that CM Punk was a big Savage fan as a kid, which I'm sure is also true, but also that that's a part of his heritage as a professional wrestler, which until I did the research I didn't know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think he started using that, I think, as a tribute on the night, the Raw after Savage's death. But and he's just stuck. But yeah, you're
Mhm.
right. That's fascinating. I mean, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to that coming out the learning tree stuff. I really enjoyed reading your drafts of it, so I'm really looking forward to that. So
All right. So the another thing that we were going to talk about, we're going to try to wrap this up in we're not going to go too far
before
over two
tomorrow,
hours.
before the end of the week.
So we have talked about Friday night. We're done talking about Friday night. We're going to move on to the next day. First, the ratings. I remember seeing WrestleNomics graph and just being like, you don't see lines like that go up that sharply. It's just not something you see in a graph very often. It was just shocking, the rating that they pulled, and it was the sort of thing that you go in thinking anything's possible because it's CM Punk, and then you go, wow, that's even more than I would have thought.
Yeah, I'm looking at the numbers right now on Trippers Daily, and how about this one number? 18 to 49, 0.72. Oh, and basically the only program to beat it was the preseason football on ESPN at 0.73.
Mm-hmm.
0.7, and finishing third on the chart that night, 0.35. Tucker Carlson. So that's double what Fox News did, which I mean, it's sensational. If you look at the numbers, for like 18 to 49, doubled the third best on the night. Yeah, it's just remarkable. Just looking at the numbers. I mean, I think TNT did a big press release, didn't they, the next day, just talking in glowing terms about AEW.
Mm-hmm.
They must absolutely adore Tony Khan right now. They're probably just like, it was a question I actually asked, which hasn't been answered yet, and I'd love to know the answer for this. I don't know what it's like in America when it comes to ad rates, but I would love to know what the ad rates were for that 90-second commercial in between the entrance and the interview. I would love to know what the ad rates were. And I wonder if Domino's looked at that and went, yeah, can we get back in on that, please?
No, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, what he said, it'll just be 90 seconds and you could hear what Punk has to say. It was just like, what? You're cutting now? Yeah, no, I hear you. Um, it's interesting you were mentioning the demographic and the rating, and I thought it was interesting. I saw that Dave Meltzer tweeted because he has access to the more granular view that like the TV execs look at of looking at local ratings from region to
Yeah.
region, and
Yeah.
the rating for Chicago itself was insane, like something that's never
Yeah.
been seen before.
Yeah. I mean, I look at okay, when it comes to females 12 to 34, 0.18, and only two programs beat that, the NFL and Love After Lockup, which sounds interesting. Um, it's just like we get 0.18. Like that's for females 12 to 34, that's insane. Like that's insane. That like that number. I mean, I'd love to know what the numbers were hang on, give me 1 second. What were the numbers for Dynamite before that? 18 for females 12 to 34. The numbers for that were 0.13. So that's an increase of, I don't know if I can find my links. Yeah, that's a link. That's gone up. Yeah, 0.05. That's gone up by almost a third
Yeah, no, it's
from.
crazy how quickly, how sharply it went up. Now, because it's a Friday show, the ratings did not drop until Monday, and on Monday we saw the ratings. We also uh, got a few things about it on YouTube. Well, and speaking of YouTube, also it's just impressive how quickly the YouTube views of those two segments, the entrance and the promo, are just been shooting up and up and up. But also on Monday, they showed us some behind the scenes, both on BTE and on the Road to YouTube programs. I thought those were really interesting, and I know that you brought them up to include them. So give me your thoughts on those.
The BCE stuff was, again, we're talking about, later on we'll talk about potential feuds. I thought the first 90 seconds of BTE were very interesting. I thought the reaction Punk had when when he heard the pop was fantastic. We went, for me? That just made me that pops me. I'm not gonna lie. And I thought the Kenny and the Bucks staying in character was quite entertaining. Them just like just rolling their eyes and going, wrap it up, wrap it up. You know, when I watched that, my first reaction was Elite versus Punk would be quite fun, wouldn't it? That'd be a
Yeah,
lot
for
of
sure.
fun. Yeah, I also mentioned the Road to. I think I'd recommend anyone watch the Road to just to watch, just how to see how how the recipe, how the omelette is made. It was just fascinating, just hearing all these numbers and the complete manicness of the truck at that time, and just seeing how everything was going. I thought that was if you're into watching the omelette being made and all that stuff, I'd really recommend Road to Dynamite. It was a fantastic little bit of business. I thought that was tremendous.
Yeah, no, it was definitely interesting to see how they were choosing the camera shots and giving directions to the cameramen to get the best shots. It was really something to see that whole process. You mentioned the possibility of a feud with the Elite. Of course, that's always definitely on the table as a possibility. And I would say, well, what kind of a group would CM Punk surround himself with? And I just like thinking about it, like he's not someone at this
No.
point who would surround himself with lackeys or underlings, but he might ally himself with people who are also against the Elite. He's got this group he has a ready-made group of people who are like an amazing kind of super friends of wrestling right now. He could link up with Hangman, Christian, and Kazarian, who are all just
Yes.
very focused on bringing the Elite down, and like, all right, together we're going to do the job.
Yeah. The Elite have made some enemies in the last couple of months in AEW, and the way Kaz has been going at the moment, he kind of needs help right now. It is getting a bit comical right now watching Kaz run into the ring and then just get beat up by 5 people. He needs bless Kaz. He needs some help, doesn't he?
Well, that's the thing is that Kaz picks his spots. Sometimes he doesn't do it effectively, but generally he runs in there and picks someone off when he can, and
Yeah,
realizes that he's alone against an army, and he's going to use guerrilla tactics. But yeah, sometimes he's going to get caught, and
yeah,
I think that they've used that very effectively. I know that we're way off topic of our
yeah.
punk related podcast, but I have never been a Kazarian fan. I like he's a fine wrestler, but I've never found his character exciting or interesting until the Elite Hunters story. Really great story for him. It's really effective.
So,
Um,
sorry to divert again. I would recommend people watch Kaz versus Brandon Cutler on Dark from a couple of weeks ago. It's a
yeah.
5 minutes. It's 5 minutes and it's very funny. And yeah, I think there's a new great move in pro wrestling. The dab elbow from Brandon Cutler is, I think, abusive.
Oh gosh. The thing is, Brandon Cutler's another example. His babyface character did nothing for me, but he is a really fantastic, absolute schmuck. What do you call it? Patsy kind of
Yeah.
heel.
To quote Taz, here comes the lane. Where every time Brandon Cutler turns up.
All right. So, now let's move on to last night. Last night we got our second look at CM Punk. What'd you think?
I thought it was very. I mean, there's two big talking points for that interview. I mean, three. I think I've already mentioned. He kind of referred to him being, the what year talking about what if and stuff like that.
Hmm.
We talked about that
Yes.
earlier. I thought the two really interesting points to make were first off, um, the Daniel Bryan hint was very interesting. I just thought that was not planned. He thought on the there was a lot. If you watch that back, there's a moment in his eyes where he goes, "Oh, I just spoiled that, haven't I?" It was supposed to be a big surprise, and I think he was playing off the crowd. It's what he's so good at. Some people when stuff happens around them with noise with fans, they panic and they hit. They kind of reveal themselves almost. Punk
Hmm.
was so cool in that moment, and he went, "Guys, just be a little bit more patient." And he basically spoiled the moment for what we think is going to be Arthur Ashe Stadium next month. It was quite a cool moment. I mean, it was a really cool moment. I thought
Absolutely.
the other moment, which I thought was rather interesting, and maybe I'm reaching here,
Right?
the shout out to his wife.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. That was the other thing I thought you were going to bring up.
I thought, okay, it was rather interesting because if you watch the media scrum, AJ only gets mentioned once in that interview, and I think it was like talking about trying to keep it the big thing secret. And obviously, Punk mentioned that his wife obviously had to know for obvious reasons, and that was it. And I was half expecting a question in the media scrum to be, so what's going to happen with AJ? Is she done? Is she done with wrestling? Is she going to wrestle again? I thought that question was going to come up, and it didn't. And with Punk mentioning it kind of got me thinking. Pardon me. It got me thinking. Could it happen? They
Well,
haven't got any. They haven't got any mainstream stars in the women's division right now. Really, if you think about it. Britt Baker. I think Britt Baker's awesome, but there's no real like mainstream star there. And
mhm.
AJ Lee coming in, she's got a cult following,
That's
you
true.
know, and
Go
she's
ahead.
got a fame outside wrestling now. If you're into like, if you're into comic books and stuff like that, she's got a bit of a buzz outside wrestling now.
Really?
And yeah, I mean, didn't she like? I swear to God, maybe I'm going bonkers here. Maybe she actually did something with a graphic novel. Unless I'm literally gone completely out to lunch on this.
I know that CM
Um,
Punk wrote a comic book just once, just to give it a try, but he's not like a big name in it. Um, uh, but what you
yeah,
said.
yeah, she
Go
said,
ahead.
yeah, she did. She wrote a Wonder Woman comic. Yeah, she wrote a Wonder Woman comic. So first
Oh,
issue of
neat.
the Black and Gold series. She was
Oh
involved
yeah,
in that one.
one of those jam books. That's really interesting. Okay, so um, you brought up two things that I want to address. One is the women's division. AJ Lee would obviously be a huge addition, whether it be as a wrestler or as a second. She was fantastic in both roles. So she would be an absolutely great person to bring in. You could definitely never say never at this point. We got CM Punk back. It's certainly on the table. I don't know if I would agree that the women's division needs more star power, but you can always use it. Somebody at that level, it's one of those things where AEW's men's division didn't need CM Punk, but look how much it's done for them. The AEW's women's division, what it needs more than anything is more time and more attention and more priority given to it. But I mean, I definitely would say that I would credit Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa as being a bigger deal than I think that you're quite giving them credit for. Thunder Rosa may not be a mainstream star, but she's someone who connects immediately with any audience that sees her. It was amazing when she first came out in NWA, and the crowd just embraced her instantly. And that, I think that happens with any crowd that ever sees her. So I think that she has that potential as well. And just like Britt Baker has already proven that she has that potential and has an amazing connection with the fans. But AJ Lee could only enhance that if she were to be included. And the other thing was regarding the yes chance. It's definitely possible that it was an accident. That it's just the flow of what he was saying got the chance started, and he rolled with it with a little bit of a spoiler. It's also completely possible. I've seen the theory out there. One of our group put it out there, the possibility that that he led them into that chant intentionally, and that it's a part of the plan of building buzz the same way that they built buzz for him. It's certainly possible too.
Yeah, yeah, we think it's happening. It's not. They haven't really. I think last night was the first real like mention of it happening. It was almost like it was the first the announce Shivani's announcement of the first dance. It almost felt like that. It was the moment. There was like that moment for that, if that makes sense. So,
Hmm.
it would be interesting. I mean, I think it was more of an accident personally. That's just my. I just if you look at Punk's face, I think he kind of realised, I just did that, didn't I? It was great. It was a good interview. It was a very fun interview to watch. Punk was great in it. There was a great moment at the start when he said to Swanee, "I can't hear you."
That was an excellent bit. Yes, I agree.
That was great. I mean, so it was, he hit all the spots he needed to hit in that moment. So yeah, I enjoyed it. It was a good interview. It was a really fun interview. I mean, he knows what he's doing when it comes to interviews, doesn't he, Punk? So he knows what he's doing. But yeah, I just got to wrestle now. That's all he has to do, isn't it?
Well, yeah, that is another thing, is that we've got a couple more weeks. Is it a week and a half? What do we have left?
Yeah, a week and a half now, isn't it? Yeah.
We've got a week and a half, which means we have like 3 shows left. Possibly only one show that he's actually going to be on. Who knows if he's going to make any further Rampage appearances? But yeah, what's he going to do for one more week where he's not wrestling? Is there going to be a face-to-face confrontation between him and Darby? What are they planning? They can't not have him on the show, but also they've pretty much committed to him not yet wrestling. So that's going to be interesting.
I honestly thought last night Sting was going to turn up during the interview and they would have a kind of a moment, like I thought Sting was going to turn up. So it'd be interesting to see what they do next week, because it's a pretty packed show next week. So it'd be interesting to see what they do. I mean, but yeah, I think the last thing that I think I'm very confident with the ideas that they're not going to touch.
Oh
They
yeah,
won't
no, I
touch.
agree.
They're not
I agree.
touching next week.
Well, and that it's not a blood feud. There's no reason for them to brawl, and neither of them are the sort that wants their character would not want an advantage of harming the other in advance of the match. That doesn't fit what their character idea. So, but as some kind of a face to face where they speak to each other directly instead of from the rafters might be interesting. Now, the timing of this was partly built around, like, let's wait to see what these Dynamite ratings are. Is this going to boost Dynamite as much as it boosted Rampage? That's not the case. It's certainly not a bad rating, but it certainly didn't go up as much as Rampage did. Is that a disappointment?
If you actually look at the 18 to if you look at the 18 to 49, no, it's not a disappointment at all. 0.67 in men 18 to 49, 0.48 in persons 18 to 49. Number one in the country that night for all the cable.
That's
It's
amazing.
it's amazing numbers. They really are. You know, you know, sorry, pardon me. The only one of the things you have to say is women right now is a bit lower in the 18. Women 18 to 49 is a bit lower than what it's been in the last couple of weeks. The 2 reasons for that: Real Housewives of Beverly Hills is 0.559 in that demo, and the challenge was 0.41. They are big hits right now. They are the Monday Night Football. They are to Dynamite what Monday Night Football is to Raw right now. It's it's just something they're gonna have to deal with going forwards. I wouldn't. It's a disappointment. I don't think it's a disappointment. First of all, it is the 3rd biggest number in AEW history.
And Challenge was on, but they beat it.
In women, it was not in women. In women, it was 0.41.
In overall audience, it
beats it, and it beats it in 1, 2. It beats it in all the demos. It beat them in. Okay, I'm gonna say this right now. I think in under 34s, it challenge beat AEW in under 34s.
Right. But in overall audience, you were saying that was the number one.
It was double. It was 506,000 for challenge, and obviously 1.172 for AEW. So
yeah, that's amazing, because Challenge has been the big one that has beaten AEW in the demo in the past, and that that it's like AEW has often been number one, but number two if Challenge was on. But that's not the case that last night. So even though we maybe didn't see the level of growth, I mean, it didn't have as much room for growth as Rampage does. Rampage is this crazy show that's on late Friday nights. This maybe didn't have as much room for growth, but it did go up
Yeah,
significantly.
it went up. It went up by 200,000.
Yeah,
That's good. That's good. That's a good number. It's just and Challenge went down by 100,000. Real Housewives went. Oh, did it go? No, actually, Real Housewives went up by 100,000. So if you take going up by 200,000. I'd love
sure.
to know I'd love to know what the quarters were. That's the next big thing that everyone.
Oh yeah, quarters will be coming soon, and then we'll be able to see what Punk's specific segment did, and that was certainly so impressive on Rampage, and I'm sure we'll find the same thing once we see it up for Dynamite. All right, I think we've covered everything that we were planning to cover. Was there anything else about this that we've somehow, despite this incredibly detailed coverage of the week of Punk, that we've maybe not discussed?
I think we've covered everything. I think the only thing we haven't covered is what how many shards of grey hairs were in his beard. That's the only thing we haven't covered yet. I think so, but no,
He looks very
I think
distinguished.
he does.
Look at my
Good for
grades.
him. Yeah, no, I'm getting a bit grey myself. I'm less worried about it than I was a week ago now, thanks to Punk.
Ah,
So if Punk, yeah,
he's your he's your gent.
we got to tag Punk in this tweet when we actually put it. If he listens to it, we got to thank Punk. Both of us got to thank him publicly for not making us less self-conscious about our grey hairs
For sure, for
before
sure.
he blocks us for mentioning it.
All right, so we're gonna finish up. Let's. I know that you mentioned some things about yourself and about what you write, but give the listeners, anybody who, thank you, by the way, if anybody listened to this whole thing, and if you are still here, now Peter, like Grayson did earlier, is going to tell you how you can find what he does.
So yeah, I'm on Twitter at Peter Edge 7. And I knew a new recruit to the website. I've done a couple of columns. My last column was about basically a love letter to the entrance of CM Punk on Rampage. It was just I basically spent a bunch of paragraphs talking about how awesome the moment was.
And now we've talked about it too.
Yeah, I mean, I forgot to mention actually. One of the things that we haven't mentioned was that camera shot when he's on the ramp, and with his fans behind him, and he's looking up at the fans like he's like a kid at Wrigley Field. It's just a beautiful camera shot, and I do go into depth about how much I love that moment. I've also written about the Summer of Punk, talking about what went wrong on WWE's, basically how they botched the angle. I talk about the pipe bomb. I talk about its resonance in 2021. It's quite interesting when you go back and listen to the pipe bomb, and it talks about Yes Men, and it talks about Triple H being a doofus and saying that the WWE may not be in better hands with Triple H, considering how NXT has not been the biggest success in the last couple of years, and how people have blamed Triple H for that. It's quite striking. Listen to the pipe bomb 10 years ago, how relevant that is in 2021. We talk about in that column. I talk about Money in the Bank, the famous match against Cena, and how interesting that match is, considering how 50-50 that match is. Really breaks from the traditional wrestling structure, how that match really does. And I've also a column which I'm very, very proud of is I did something about the Wyatt family versus the Shield, and talking about really how WWE wanted to present certain people in that feud, Roman Reigns and Bray Wyatt, and how things have turned out for everyone since then. So yeah, I do a weekly column for Pro Wrestling Musings. I also do a monthly tag team power rankings. If you're a Gun Club fan, you might like where I put them in the rankings.
I am not.
Hey, they look they're undefeated in 2021.
They've never fought anybody. I mean,
Oh, hey,
except for Camarado and Solo. Yes, they've beaten
yeah,
them,
but
but
yeah,
who've
come
they
on, so,
beaten?
and me and you had a big debate on the group chat about Santana and Ortiz and my low ranking of that team, which I still stand by.
Well, anyway, so that's where they can
Moving
find
on,
you, and
moving
that's
on,
a
moving
little
on.
bit of what you do. And I, uh, I agree. It's really amazing that there's only two of the six in that feud still with WWE. It's crazy.
Yes.
Yeah, and as far as the Punk thing, the promo, the pipe bomb, it's also crazy that a couple years ago, a lot of people would say that what he had said about Triple H had been disproven when NXT was booming. And yeah, that's the public feeling has turned completely against that in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I am Sergio Alderman. Sergio Alderman, SergeiAlderman is my Twitter handle. I share my thoughts from time to time with those few people who follow me and want to hear those thoughts. And also, I regularly, not lately, because I've been more focused on CM Punk, but I'll be getting back to it. Present a Styles Make Fights column where I preview the upcoming singles matches in on AEW and talk about how the mix of offense used by those wrestlers in previous matches influences the matches that they have upcoming. It's an interesting perspective. I have a spreadsheet tool that I use for that, which is publicly available. Just go to prowrestlingmusings.com and go to the Styles Make Fights tab, and you'll see all of my columns and also a link to that tool, the Styles Makes Fights a tool for looking at the offense mix of different wrestlers, different members of the AEW roster. And hopefully, in the next few weeks, I will also be beginning the Under the Learning Tree series. I'm still working on um, a research investigation of the heritage of wrestling that led to the current AEW star, Sammy Guevara. It's a really fascinating story of who trained him and who trained them, and taking that all the way back to uh, far-flung places, Japan, Hawaii, Finland, England, Lancashire, Wigan, England specifically. How far is that from where you live? Are you in London?
I'm in Birmingham, so I'm basically I'm in the Midlands. So Lancashire is. I'm guessing when you mention Lancashire, you're thinking Wigan and Billy
Wigan.
Robinson's.
Yes.
Yeah, that is
Yes.
Billy Robinson. That is basically the old pit where basically all the great catch can wrestlers were trained. Yeah, so we're like Birmingham is right in the middle of England of England and the United Kingdom. So yeah, we. It's actually where Tom Cruise is shooting Mission Impossible this week.
Oh yeah. Well,
Yeah, so
that's where you can find me, and I think that it's time to bring this to a close. I hope that we've offered some interesting perspectives on the week of CM Punk. Please join us again for future Pro Wrestling Musings podcasts.